Welcome to The Change, a podcast about the changes in life that shake, break, and make us. I'm Laura, a 45-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum who has until recently always loved change.
And I'm Cathy, a 53-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum, and change is actually my kryptonite. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia on which this podcast is recorded and recognise the continuing connections to lands, waters and communities.
We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and elders past and present.
Hey, how you going, Laura? It's been so long. I haven't seen you.
No, I'm so happy to see your face, Cathy. It has been a very long time, and I think my accent might give it away that I feel like I've re-Britishized or something. I feel like I've got some... my accent's gone a bit extra British. I don't know. I've been overseas.
Yeah, it has. It's a little bit stronger than it was when you left.
A few people have said that to me, and I don't notice, but I think, look, it probably would. I've been spending a lot of time with my British family and friends, so it makes perfect sense. Yeah. How are you? How have you been?
Oh, look, it's been busy back here. Yeah, gosh, I don't know. It feels like a long time since we chatted. We chatted just before you left.
Yes, we did.
If I remember rightly.
Yes.
And it was a bit of a tough time for you. You were dealing with the loss of a dear friend. So we had a bit of a chat about that. We've had some super incredible guests on since while you've been away.
Yes.
And what have I been up to? I just, really just life for me, just holding down the fort, new job.
Appreciate you.
And I appreciate you. Just holding down the fort, new job, and just kind of just doing.
Being a busy working mom.
Yeah. And I came back from holidays as well.
That's right.
Had I been away?
Yeah, because we were talking about packing for big trips and what a nightmare it is. And yeah. So I had my trip away, and I wasn't away for as long as you. No.
And in what seems to be usual form for me, I actually got quite sick when I was on holidays. It was my second last day sick, and I ended up in the medical centre on a on a ship. I actually ended up there twice, which was
not great.
Not great.
What happened to you, Cathy? Did you
look, at this point, our best guess is I was seasick. I was just really sick, vomiting. And then they insisted on treating me for high blood pressure.
Oh dear.
Which I typically have what people often refer to as white coat syndrome. So my GP doesn't actually get my blood pressure when I'm in the practice. They get me to take a photo of my blood pressure at home.
Very common.
And then I go to the doctors, and if they do it there, they are invariably very different readings. And so in the medical centre of the ship, they were insisting on treating that in addition to the fact that I could not stop vomiting. Andrew was quite concerned because 12 months ago I had an episode of sepsis, and there was sort of really no known cause for that either, but that my sepsis developed through vomiting. So he was worried. And the seas were a bit rough, and it was I think I was just seasick, and but my second visit to the medical centre was somewhat more dramatic, and I ended up passing out in the bathroom. I was unconscious, and fortunately Andrew was in the cabin. He heard me fall. I don't remember much about it. I remember him being quite in my face, screaming at me. And he was just trying to get me away.
Yeah, he was worried.
Screaming at me. He was, going into like first responder mode. I remember kind of looking at him thinking, why is he screaming at me? I was having a really nice sleep in our bed at home. I had no idea
really
where I was.
Confused. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really confused. And I had bruising, a beautiful black eye, and anyway,
God.
it was all very dramatic. I had previously on the cruise joked with Andrew and said, I wonder how they get people, from like, the deck, whenever you hear these medical emergency things, how they get people from the deck down into the medical centre. Well, I found out.
Do they have a stretcher?
Yeah, there is a stretcher. It's exactly like an ambulance situation. I think at one point when they were in our cabin, there were many, many people in our cabin. They were considering, because I was on the bed by this point, Andrew had sort of managed to get me out of the bathroom, which is very tiny. Fortunately, he got me out of there because it is very, very tiny. No people would have fitted in there. I think they were considering picking me up and carrying me onto the stretcher with the sheets off the bed. But anyway, I managed to get myself to the stretcher, and then we went in the lift, and that's what they do. So it's just exactly like being in a hospital, except it costs a lot more money. We're waiting to hear on the travel insurance. And so, it's we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Dramatic end to your holiday. Very dramatic
end. To
Are you okay now?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just felt really robbed.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you get home from holidays and you want to be really relaxed. And my best friend said to me in the most loving way possible, I've never seen someone come back from holidays and look worse than what they did when they left. And I was like, thanks, I love you too.
Well, that's no good.
But aside from that, we met some really lovely people from Canada, and we did have a really lovely time until I got sick. So
goodness.
And then work and just, kids and family, and life goes on, right?
Yeah. Well, this is where I'm at the moment, getting back into that all stuff, the life, the family, the routine. And I have to say, it was a difficult trip, as any listeners will know. I was really sad about my dear friend and going to a funeral, and it was really, really challenging. And that grief will be with me for, probably for life. It's not something I just will recover from. And it did seep into most corners of the holiday. And it's not to say that you can't enjoy things. I think that's a weird thing about grief, and a weird thing about maybe losing a friend. It's not in the hierarchy of grief, and it's something people talk about. If you lose a parent, or of course, worst case scenario, a child, that's the worst possible thing anyone could think of. And a friend is like a strange, I don't know, like situation to be in, especially at our age. It's not that common to lose a friend. It certainly has happened. Anyway, I was trying, of course, to see my people that are well and enjoy bits of the trip, and I did. It wasn't all sad, but it was just that, just like a bit of a cloud, of course, hanging around, and moments where I was just really sad. I just did a lot of crying, did a lot of talking, and thankfully was very distracted by being in Paris and being in Copenhagen. And it certainly was, there were moments of great joy, and time to spend precious time with other people, which was really, very, very well timed. But coming home, you do realise I realised how much I love routine, and how much I'd missed it, and how much I hated living out of a bag and having my creams and my makeup all just sort of sprawled or stuck in a bag and could never find anything. And I didn't enjoy that part of it. I think it's hard, isn't it? Just moving around. It felt like we were sort of backpacking, but with kids and with giant cases and clothes that needed ironing. So, I really need to get a bit of a handle on compressing what I need to take when I go overseas. And anyway, maybe next time I will, or designing the trip a little bit differently, so we get a bit more time to relax and less time kind of on the road. Catching up with lots of different people, and that's really hard. It's really hard to try and fit everybody in, and I want to fit everyone in because I don't often get a chance to see them. So it's just the way that it is, really. I can't complain. First world problems, rah rah rah. But happy to be back. At the end of all that little monologue, I am happy to be home and to be recording with you. And it's a big week here, isn't it? World. I mean, not just here.
Oh yeah.
What's happening?
So
please tell.
I guess for anyone
you don't know
listening this week, and if by chance you are not a political nerd like me, and you are living, I don't know, underneath a rock somewhere, and you haven't heard that there's this kind of little election thing happening. Well, it's tomorrow our time, but I think voting actually starts kind of, Tuesday, the first Tuesday in November is election day in the US of A. And feels kind of significant. I feel like...
how are we here again?
Yeah, how are we here again, and how is look, you know, I'm not going to make any secrets of the fact that I am no Trump supporter. And what I am completely fascinated by, and, you know, without going on a big rant, but I am completely fascinated by the fact that a man who is a convicted felon is on parole waiting sentencing for 34 felony charges, is also was also found guilty of sexual abuse by a jury of his peers, bankrupt, not personal bankrupt, but business bankrupt multiple times. This is a man who has very few redeeming features that I can kind of find, you know, and the longer he is in the public eye, the more people that come out who know him, who also say that he has very few redeeming features, and they kind of have to own their part in maybe getting him elected in 2016 or trying to get him re-elected in 2020, or having been part of his inner sanctum, or, you know, part of his staff when he was president of the United States. So it just fascinates me that he could even be running for
100%.
highest office in the world. Like, it's the largest democracy in the world. And I just am completely fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by the fact that all of these rallies that happen, whether they be for the, you know, the GOP or the Republicans or the Democrats, the rallies are really held to inspire people to get out and vote, because voting is not compulsory in the US, for anyone who doesn't know that. Whereas in Australia, if you are an Australian citizen, it is compulsory. You will get fined.
And quite a decent amount too, right?
Yeah, and it's not optional. So we have to play a part in the choice of our government. Lots of people, well, I wouldn't say lots. I think there's a small percentage. A million years ago, I used to work on actually polling day and the count and all of that. And there's a percentage, I'm pretty sure it's less than 5%, of people go get their name marked off. They either don't fill out the ballot, or they draw pictures or write words, or they choose no one.
Protest.
You know, what we would call a donkey vote. So we have a part to play in our democracy in Australia, and I don't think we should take that for granted, because I think it is really important, no matter how you vote, like who you vote for. That isn't kind of what I'm saying. I just really fascinates me that ultimately all these election rallies in the US are about motivating people
just purely to vote.
To vote.
The basic.
Yeah. Just the very basic.
And there's so many problems even with that, isn't there? Because it's held, for one, it's held on a Tuesday, which is really difficult for people that are low income to get, you know, time off work. They don't want to. They might not get paid. They have to queue up for hours in long queues. Whereas in Australia, voting's normally held on a Saturday, so it's not a work day for a lot of people, probably the vast bulk. So, yeah, there's many things wrong with their system. And the whole American voting system is very hard to understand, and it's very weighted. And the colleges, and I can't even get my head around it. I'm not even going to go into it, but I find certain states, obviously, it's the weighted. They have a lot of power, and you might be the most popular person and get most of the actual votes of the people, but that doesn't mean you're going to win the election. It's a challenging thing to get your head around as a foreigner. And I should say as well, in the UK, it's not compulsory voting as well. So Australia, I think, is really I think that's a great a great way of doing it. I think there should be compulsory voting to get a proper understanding of how people feel.
How the electorate really feels.
Yeah.
I mean, while you were away, Queensland had an election, you know, and they did change government, although they didn't change. The shock that was in that election was that they were expected to change government in an absolute landslide. The sitting party was expected to lose and be absolutely wiped out and, you know, not really retain very many seats. There was a big groundswell. But actually what happened was not that. I mean, they changed government. But it wasn't the groundswell, it wasn't the landslide that they expected it to be. Now, I don't know what that says about Australian politics, whether we're moving towards the middle. I don't know. I don't know we're not political analysts, so that's not what I'm talking about here. But it's more just the fascination of what people expect to happen and what actually happens, and what we hope happens as well. But, you know, it's that, yeah. So I'm really fascinated. And by the time this episode drops,
we should know.
Well, fingers crossed we know.
It might go on, mightn't it?
It could be 3 to 4 days. So
and we ahead,
drop on Thursday. So that could be like day 2 of counting, really. I'm hoping that we have a strong indication. And I'm hoping that it's a strong indication away from
that it's towards
Trump and towards what seems to be more decent. And I know that she's not perfect. Her policies are not perfect. But I'm not sure that there is any such thing as a perfect politician.
No. And especially in a 2-party race, like you just can't. It's very difficult for the person to be perfect, and they're representing an entire party as well.
Yeah.
But I think surely a vote for intelligence, for rationality, for, you know, good, open communication, healthcare for women, like all these things that there's just such a worry in the world. And just Trump's just the unknown, what he might do with Russia or with North Korea. Like there's just so much scary potential. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, as you say, I am not a political analyst, but I'm very, very much hoping for a Democratic win.
Yes. Yeah. So we've talked about holidays. We've talked about big things that are happening around the world. So I guess we're sort of thinking about where are we? Where are we in the midst of all of this? Where are we in our lives? And we were kind of talking about what do we talk about, you know, in this
I think when we were discussing this episode, I thought it was so interesting how we went through a raft of different themes and we both landed on this. So it's clearly a moment and something that we've both been thinking of, and probably because, you know, we've both been through some big things in the last little while. And so our big theme for this week is the general fragility of life and what this means when you happen to be in midlife. And you sent me some hilarious clips about Gen X feeling like we're being phased out. And I think that to me is where I'm at. I've suddenly kind of come to this realization. I don't know why it's taken so long, quite honestly, but that life is short, life is precious. And now here we are in this moment, like looking at the back end of our life. But before we go maybe down that rabbit hole of like the big theme, I just want you to explain the comedy thing that you sent me from the Holderness family about that whole.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was so hilarious. And we will share it.
We'll share it in the show notes. Yep.
But it was a YouTube clip that I came across, and the Holderness family, hilarious people. They do lots of parody songs.
Yeah, US based, right?
US based.
Couple, funny.
Yeah, very funny. really take the piss out of a lot of things, right? Through humor and music. But this YouTube clip really hit the mark with me because she'd been at the doctor's and she was sitting in the waiting room and Salt and Pepper was playing in the waiting room of the doctor's surgery. Now, a lot like them, I kind of think of Salt and Pepper as like, you know, Push It, and I'm dancing and I hear that music and I am immediately transported back to the nightclubs where I'm dancing and I've got a very short skirt on and I've got my Doc Martens and I am not 53 years old. I am not sitting in the doctor's waiting room listening to Salt and Pepper or Nirvana or anything else that really is our generation, like a Virgin, Madonna, really not sitting there thinking, this is waiting room music. And yeah, so that's kind of where we went.
It was, and I think it was funny. The couple were just kind of taking the piss out of being suddenly realizing that they are old. You know, what used to be in the doctor's waiting room surgery was that trad rock, the Eagles or
Yacht
the Beatles. Yeah, that's right. For the old boomers, I guess, who are
Cross.
in the waiting room getting their knees and hips checked out, and then suddenly they realize that is actually now them. That's us. And I think that's been something that I've thought about too. And there's a few. So just before we went away as well, I went to one of Lee's and Sarah's disco clubs in Newcastle, and that's been doing really well. And I think because our generation, we still want to have a laugh, we still want to have fun, and we want to dance to this sort of the music of our youth, like Salt and Pepper, for example. And I went to that and felt alive and brilliant, had the best night out. But there was a moment, because it was held in a Newcastle nightclub, and there was a crossover between us and the youth, the actual clubbing youth, so that we were sharing the toilets with them. And we were in there, and this girl, I don't know if she intentionally meant it or not, but made a joke about smelling like old ladies. Yeah. And I looked at my friend, who's this gorgeous 43-year-old and like not old lady.
No.
Yeah. No. But see, this young girl, she had the big lashes, tiny little hot pants on, gorgeous, probably 18. And to her, we would have been old ladies. And that's her. Whether she was trying to be cute about this perfume smell, I don't know whether she meant it in a mean way about us smelling like old ladies, or if she just is one of those phrases you use, isn't it? Because being an old lady is so derogatory that you just throw it out there, and she might have then looked at us and thought, oh, you know,
but I guess when I think old lady perfume,
you think little Nana with the rinse, purple
7-Eleven. Rinse. You remember the bottle of 7-Eleven perfume? Do you remember
I don't,
that?
but I'm smelling it like lavender or something.
Yeah, but
okay,
like that was fancy perfume, but it was like what my Nana had.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, A was our perfume. And
was it though? That my mum wore an A&A.
Well, see,
there's a crossover.
I'm a little bit older than you, don't forget.
Yeah.
And that was the first perfume that I was given.
It was very trendy. Don't get me wrong, I loved an A&A.
Very trendy. Whereas my mum was a Red Door wearer.
Okay.
Elizabeth Arden.
Which
is actually having a real moment again. Elizabeth Arden has been rebranded, seeing many of the millennial, young millennials, influencers,
coming back to it.
Elizabeth Arden, which when I think of Elizabeth Arden, I think of my mum. I think of Red Door. I think of, it really takes me to my mum. It's not, I don't think of
contemporary
is what me, like Clinique is what I think of.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, it's really hard because when I think of myself, as I said, I'm 53. I'm aware of my age in terms of I'm aware of the aches and the pains and the creaks and the moans and the groans when I'm trying to get up, and that extra pee that I need to do in the night and all of those little things that come with aging. And, you know, the HRT and all of those things.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm not 53.
Of course. Yeah.
Chronologically, I completely understand I am. But in my head, I still kind of think of myself as like maybe a young mum, like, you know, maybe early 30s.
Yeah.
Sort of, like maybe in that, you know, young mum, but still kind of probably thinking, yeah, I could get away with it in the nightclubs. But really, I don't want to be out much past 10:30 at
well,
night.
That's why there's like, no, I agree. And, Disco Club is doing so well for that reason.
And yeah, and it's funny because recently when I did get home from holidays, I went out and I saw a show and went with my best friend and a couple other girlfriends. And that night I went back to my best friend's place because I drove, and she was home alone. Like her family was out, and it was just the two of us. And it's rarely just the two of us, you know. We've either got our husbands with us or there's kids around or whatever. And we were just sitting on the lounge, just chatting, having a cup of tea and, you know, raging, but having a good old real natter that we hadn't had for a very, very long time. And my husband sent me a message and it was like, I don't know, 10 to midnight or something. He's like, are you ever coming home tonight? I was like, oh, rude, was my first thought. And then I was like, oh, it's midnight. Like, okay. And then when I got home, he was like, you know, you're normally in bed at 9:30, right? And I was like, yeah, I get that. So it was this real strange, like I wasn't even feeling tired, but at the same time, it was as soon as I realized what the time was, we're like, oh, it's way past pumpkin o'clock.
Exactly.
Kind of
You're going to be turning into that pumpkin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when we were thinking about this theme, we were thinking about that we've got less in front of us than we have behind us in terms of time. And that's not because I'm unwell, not because you're unwell. It's just the passing of time. It's just the way it goes. And it feels a little overwhelming a little bit when you stop and think about it a little bit too much. I mean, there's lots of joyful moments that will come ahead of us. My son and his fiance are planning their wedding, so that is a joyful moment. I'm seeing my nieces and nephews have their babies, so we're seeing the next generation coming. So there's a lot of joyful moments, but I also am kind of bracing myself for those inevitable sad moments that I know are coming, which involve saying goodbye to my parents, saying goodbye to the last of that generation that is ahead of me. And then all of a sudden, I think one of the other reels I shared with you was we want the adult. Like all of a sudden, like, when did we become the adult in the room?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I still kind of sometimes look around and go, where's the adult in the room? Because it doesn't feel like it's me.
Yeah, that we qualify just yet. We're still too young.
I feel like I'm qualified to be the adult in the room, and yet here we are.
I know.
The adults in the room.
Yeah, and that's so hard. And what you said there too about there being less time ahead than there is in the past. I think it's that in itself is absolutely true. You know, if I live till 90 or you live till 106, that's a very, very good age and is, you know, statistically relatively unlikely for both of us to live that long. So it is that, but it's also the quality, isn't it? The quality of what's ahead versus what's behind. And I look at my 14-year-old son, who's all about getting stronger and taller, and he's so kind of hopeful about getting, when I'm in my 20s, I'm going to be my prime mum, is one of the things he said to me before. I was like, oh God. I'm thinking, yeah, I guess that you are, and that's ahead for you. That's very much in the past for me. And don't I know it? Don't I feel it? You know, in my literal bones, but also just in everything. And I think the things that have started to kind of fall apart for me, even in just in the last 2 years, have been things like my eyesight. You know, I'm one of those people now that has to hold my phone out a bit further to have a look at it. And I knew that was coming because I used to laugh at my husband when he was doing that, but now it's me. And things like sensitive teeth or, sore hips and all these really boring parts of getting older that are just like these tiny little reminders that we are not in our 20s or 30s anymore. And then it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to kind of go, well, how do I remain hopeful? And we've had a whole episode about the good stuff, right? So there is good stuff, but it is on other days really hard to stay hopeful, especially when confronted with grief or thinking too hard about the realities and the difficulties of aging and the future losses, like you say, with parents, with, you know, that generation. It's just really hard. Aging is not for the weak, as they say.
No, it sure isn't. And I also think that we make decisions when we are young, youthful decisions, brash decisions, bold decisions that I can still be very impulsive, and, you know, that is very much a trait of mine to make impulsive, brash decisions. But I don't make impulsive, big decisions. I would love to go and live in another country for a couple of years, you know. I would love to take Andrew and we would go and live in Fiji and I could teach at the school that I went to school at. When we visited Fiji a couple of years ago, they basically offered me a job on the spot.
Oh, wow.
I am a trained teacher, so I have all of those transferable skills. It's a Commonwealth country. There's, you know, like, it's not as hard as it would sound to be able to do that. I did that as a child, which is why Fiji is a country that appeals to me to do that. But I examined that decision from absolutely every single angle, and I'm quite sure my parents did when they made the decision to live in Fiji. And we are way more connected now than we ever were, you know. I mean, it was 6 weeks for a letter, all of those things. We didn't phone home. We didn't, like, all the things that we can just do at the touch of a button. But I examine that from every single possible angle and just think, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can not be in Australia. And not be near my parents as they age, even though we're not physically close. I'm only an hour and 15 minutes away from them, which is significantly closer than you are to your parents.
Yeah.
And so there's all those kinds of things that I think, well, do I want to miss out on, you know, my son and future daughter-in-law, you know, when should they decide to have babies? You know, do I want to miss out on those pregnancy moments? There's all of those things. And I think I overanalyze those things. Whereas when we're young, and maybe you can speak to this, when we're young and, you know, youthful and bold, and we just make decisions on a whim and go, well, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember doing that and feeling... And I remember my mum being quite upset when I decided to, you know, come over to Australia. And I understand much more now, obviously, as a parent. And I think that, of course, it's upsetting if your child just goes, you know what, I'm just going to go and live in Australia for a year, or whatever it was I was doing at the time, because I had that freedom of choice, which she didn't have as a, you know, she was working. They were probably still paying their mortgage. She was probably then in her 40s, like I am now. And yeah, you just don't have the freedom to make those decisions, and it would be really hard. And I sometimes think that too. And I don't think it's I do think it's normal actually to feel some jealousy towards the young and the youthful generation and your own kids, because you're like, God, you know, 5 minutes ago it feels like that was me, and now it's definitely not me. And you love your kids so much, and you want them to, you know, have the best of everything and all the experiences and be happy and at the end of the day. But at the same time, you're like, oh, that's no longer me. And even though I sometimes feel like I've still got bloody main character energy syndrome or whatever And I think I'm still the main character of my life, of course.
Yep.
But that I'm a really boring main character because I have to make really boring practical decisions on a daily basis. And yeah, it can't just be like, I'm going to live in Canada or whatever I wanted to do when I was 21. So yeah, it's a weird sort of struggle, isn't it? And I think you have that sense of like, okay, the future is closing in. It's opening up for our kids. It's closing in for us. What are we going to do with it? So there's a sense of like this massive urgency, and also a kind of sense of like, well, if I do have an urgency and a small amount of future, am I doing what I want to be doing? But then you're like, but I still need to pay the bills. You know, I'm thinking, I'd love to write a novel, but I also need a job, but I also just need to make dinner. You know, you're always overthinking. Yeah.
It just feels like sometimes being an adult is not a whole lot of fun. It's not what you think it's going to be when you're a kid. And when you're going to be in your prime, as your delightful son said. And he is going to be in his prime, and it's going to be amazing, and he's going to have the world at his feet, and my children do too. It's just, I still want to be relevant. I still want to be.
Yes, I hate the feeling of being phased out, like on the shelf, like we're just crumbled up old crones.
And probably why I have such an issue with feeling invisible, even though Gen X is often referred to as the invisible generation. It's probably what I have the most issue with around feeling invisible. And I know that a lot of that I can control, and I can wear a bright red lippy, and I can wear bright, colourful clothing, and all of those things. There's a lot of aspects of that I can control. But to a certain degree, the reality is we are being phased out. The next generation is coming after us. And that is the cycle of life as well. You know, I mean, you're probably not quite as far along the journey as Andrew and I, but we're having retirement conversations.
Yeah, we've started to, but yeah.
Superannuation conversations with our friends, and we sit around and we go, so what do you think? Should we still be in, the high yield, or is it time to, change down and diversify? And I have no idea what any of those things mean. But it's just about maximizing the amount of money I have when I retire.
Yeah.
And so, but like, we're thinking about that retirement, because that is closing in, and we want to be able to still do the things that we want to do when we retire. So, yeah, it's a tricky time, but I look, it's a cross the hill I will die on is that the 80s was the best generation for music.
I love that. And when I was on the ferry to France, or on the way home from France, there was an 80s quiz, and I was like, I got this, guys. I got it. I'm here.
And did you win?
We didn't win, but we did pretty well in the 80s music category. So it was good fun. But just on the point of being phased out, I think it's just a really hard thing to deal with, isn't it? And because we just live in such a youth-centric culture, it is as if you are kind of being just swept, move along now. You've had your time, shut up, you're no longer youthful, and your collagen levels have,
and I don't even really feel like I had my time. This is the thing.
And I think a lot of women feel, and I read something online, and I'll try and find the Instagram post, and it's all about how at this phase of life as well, a lot of women look back with regret, or that feeling of, did I just waste my life? Like, what was that? What was my supposed peak? And a lot of that peak was spent maybe working in jobs you didn't enjoy, or raising young children while your husband worked a lot, and then you suddenly look around and you're kind of going, was that it? Is that the best?
Was that really it? Was that they really the best of my year?
And now you expect me just to shut up and be quiet and just go over there and sit,
get hot.
Get hot and be quiet. And I don't think it should. I think there needs to be some more intergenerational discussion. And I think that our generation is changing that. And we're not going to just, have our hair dyed purple and wear pearls and little twin sets, and we're still going to be partying even if it is before 10.
Are very unlikely to go quietly off into the sun. I think it is fair to say that Gen X, especially Gen X women, have found their voice, and it is unlikely we are going to disappear quietly.
No, and I love that. I love that for us. Okay, let's end this. Let's wrap this up with some recommendations, Cathy.
I reckon you've probably got one, a good one. I reckon you've probably spent some time reading.
God. I really have. Yes.
The time while you were away.
Yes, quick film and then a book. So my film is called Firebrand, and I watched it on the plane, and it is available, I believe, in Australia. I just had a quick look on Netflix, and it was on Apple TV. It stars Jude Law, and it's about Henry VIII's last wife, Catherine Parr. So Henry VIII is just old, horrible, kind of meanie.
Not a nice man.
Not a nice man, an actual criminal and an awful human. And it's just sort of charts the last few weeks and months of his life and what an amazing, brave woman Catherine Parr was. Yeah, it's a really good, really part of history that I didn't really know much about, because obviously everyone talks about Anne Boleyn and that whole the way he divorced his first wife in order to marry her. So very good. I recommend it. It's a really interesting film. And the book is called Wifedom by Anna Funder. It's actually, Wifedom, Mrs. Orwell's Invisible Life, and it's all about George Orwell's wife, Eileen. And I was a big George Orwell fan. I love 1984 and Animal Farm, obviously a very talented and celebrated author from the last century. And this is a kind of, these are some letters that the author Anna Funder discovered about Eileen, George's wife, and the involvement that she really had in his life, and how important she was, and how he kind of glazed over a lot of this importance. And it's actually quite awful for anyone that loves George Orwell, because you realise maybe that he wasn't quite the man that you think he was, or the talent. And it also then makes you think about all the other male authors that were supported by incredible, hardworking, intelligent women through the years. And it's just a really good read. And for anyone that loves George Orwell's work, there's a lot of that in there. And his wife, Eileen, was also a brilliant writer, and she wrote a lot of poems. And it's a really good read. Anna Funder's a genius. I recommend 5 out of 5 stars for that one. Cathy?
Well, I will definitely give Firebrand a look, because it, being Henry VIII and all of that, one of my favourite musicals with the twins is Six.
It's coming.
We're going, the girls and I are going for the 3rd time this weekend. I know, can't wait. We're taking my future daughter-in-law with us, because she has not seen Six, the musical. So we will be heading off to see that in Sydney. Very excited. So I will definitely give Firebrand a look. My book is a little sneak peek. We have a fabulous interview coming, and both Laura and I are very excited about it, and my book might tell you who that is. I read Gina Chick's book, We Are the Stars, and I'm not going to give anything away. You'll have to listen to our interview for that. I will simply say, get hold of it, read it. It's life-changing.
It's incredible. Agreed.
Yeah. There's just, man, woman, alien, there's something in there for everybody.
An incredible life and an incredible woman.
Absolutely. And my TV show is season 2, The Diplomat, it is called. It stars Kerry Russell, who was of Felicity fame for our Gen Xers. She is just fabulous. Season 1, she was thrust into the world of being the ambassador to London, from the US ambassador to London. And she wasn't expecting that at all. She was meant to be going to Afghanistan. to help with the transition there, and her and her husband were getting a divorce and she was done with him, and next thing you know, she finds herself on a plane to London as the ambassador, embroiled in a very diplomatic political suspense drama, but at the same time not super deep or like anything like that. And season 1 ends on a cliffhanger. There's an explosion. Her husband is involved in that explosion, and season 2 is out now, and it's as good as season 1. It certainly doesn't wrap everything up, and before season 2 was announced, before season 2 dropped, season 3 had already commenced filming. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And
I've heard so many good things.
Netflix, I would hard recommend getting a Netflix account just to watch The Diplomat, and obviously Firebrand.
Yeah. Well, that's on my list now. I've heard not just from you, but that is a very good show, and I can't wait to get into it.
It's great. Well, I think that's kind of us. We have some fabulous episodes still to come, 2 absolutely cracking guests to come.
Yeah, to round out season 3.
Yes, and one of them we've just given away, and one of them is of MasterChef fame. So that is a cracking episode as well. And if you haven't caught up on any of our past episodes from season 3, hard recommend go give them a listen. There's some crackers in there as well. Just a like, a rate, review. And if you have a guest suggestion, whether that's you or someone you know, reach out, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you.
We just love to hear from you.
Yeah, we do. And I love seeing you back on my screen. So
yay!
Happy. Feel like the world is right again.
Hooray.
And, yes, and his fingers crossed for a Kamala win.
Yeah, go Kamala.
Thanks for listening to The Change, a fully independent podcast. Whether you're seeking inspiration, curious about change, or just here for the great banter, we'd love you to make The Change your new go-to podcast.
And even better, send us your voice notes or questions about change. We'll use them on the show. Email us at changepod2023@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at _change_pod. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more on The Change.